buttoned down since I was in college, I think. I did go to a college, I was in the preppy handbook, so I definitely had them then. I'd like to call the Planning Commission work session to order. Heather, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Granger?
Here.
Mr. Boswell?
Here.
Mr. Klee? Ms. Macbeth?
Here.
Mr. Edwards?
Here.
Mr. Schaller? Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Okay, so our work today is with Chapter 5, the neighborhoods. This is our second second draft of it, the second time we've gone through it. Carolyn.
Yeah. So basically highlighted in red, this has all been updated with the new information from last year. The first time we saw that, we did not have the 2018-2019 neighborhood counts. So I have updated all of those, so the information you see before you today includes all of that. In the first paragraph, instead of its neighborhoods, I had a suggestion to change that to them. So if the commission is okay with that, instead of saying to preserve and enhance its neighborhoods, I had a request to preserving and enhancing them.
Because neighborhoods is earlier in that same sentence.
Right.
Makes sense to me. Makes sense to me. I did have a question. The next sentence is a quote or has a quote in it, and we don't have the source of that quote anywhere. It was not obvious to me what that quote is from.
Okay, I'll look that up. And basically, in the next paragraph is I compiled all the data in that, so this is basically a comprehensive list of the owner and rental occupancy in the city neighborhoods is shown in Table 5.1, which is on the next page. Of the 80 neighborhoods listed, 65 are residential, 9 are apartment complexes, and 6 are on commercial quarters with residential units. When the apartment complexes and commercial quarters are factored out, the owner occupancy of the 65 neighborhoods is 57%, with 43% renter occupants. This is the higher occupancy than the 46% listed in the 2010 census. When the apartment complexes and commercial quarters are factored in, the occupancy rate for the city is 38 and 62. This also differs from the 2010 census figures of 44% and 56%. So that's basically on the data. And I want to make sure everybody understands that for all of these counts, unless we get specific information from a neighborhood about the renter owner, it's based on a dwelling unit is considered renter occupied if the owner's address is different from the property address. And that's especially important for neighborhoods that are not in the rental inspection district. In the rental inspection district, I have good data because you need a rental permit to do it. But for, say, neighborhoods like Skipwith or the Carriage Homes or any of those neighborhoods that are not in the rental inspection district, that dwelling unit is what I'm showing you on the screen. So that's why I've got that up there to remind people. A good example of that is I had a gentleman last night at the ARB meeting who said that the Carriage Homes only has 5 rentals instead of 10. And I said, well, if you would get me the information on that, I'd be happy to update it in the chart. But that's just to put it in the back of your mind that outside of the rental inspection districts, the counts are based on that. And that's how we've been counting them over the years.
So two comments on that. So that final sentence is separate from the big paragraph.
Right.
Do you intend for that to stay in the document, or is that just a note for us when we were looking
That's
at it?
a note for now. I will probably make that smaller and put an asterisk in it when I get to the end.
Right.
And the reason I didn't do it here is I want to put a picture in here. And I didn't want to, it throws everything off if I try to estimate where I'm going to put a picture. But yes, I will put an asterisk and I'll put it in the text also to reflect back down to that, as that's how we count a dwelling unit.
I noticed you had that same little text, dwelling unit, renter
Yes.
occupied, quite a few times through there.
Right.
There might be a uniform way just to, the first time you mention it, and then just say for purposes of this chapter, and then eliminate
Right.
it later.
Okay.
And but I did have a question about the content of the big red paragraph. In reading this, my initial remarks to myself here was, is there a conclusion to these numbers that you're trying to I mean, to me, it's like there's a presentation of our number versus the census number, our number looked at differently versus the census number. So is there then a
I think
conclusion that we're
basically
taking from that?
what it's probably trying to say is that we have a greater owner occupancy than the census shows us, especially if you take out our apartment complexes and so forth in it, that people think that we have more renters than owners. It's true if you count the apartment complexes. It's not true if you don't count the apartment complexes, because everybody thinks our rental occupancy is much higher than the 38%. They think 38% is right, when in fact, if you take out those other, we've got a 57% owner occupancy.
So why is the census data off by that much?
I think they don't look at, they're not getting the good counts and don't look at, they're probably doing the same type of thing that we're doing. We have better data than they would. I'm getting ready to do the census updates right now, and that's one of the projects that I have on my desk, where I have to add in the new addresses for next year's census count. So I've got 45 days to go through the last 10 years worth of addresses and new neighborhoods to put in there and give it to census so that they get the census information out. So I think it's how good is their data that they're getting, and so that's why I think it's different.
Is there something we can do to in an organized way, get better data from, like I know just from Holly Hills where I live, the number of rentals that you have is higher, by several than it actually is, because people just don't live there.
Right.
They have the houses on the market, or, somebody else owns it, but the family lives there.
Unless I have contacts in the neighborhoods, like my neighborhood, for example, I know how many rentals are in my neighborhood. Most of them are second homes, so it would be different. So I try to see if there are ways to get, and what's really hard is that the presidents of the associations change every year, and it's hard to keep up with who's the current president or whoever to get the information from. But like I said, for the carriage homes, I told Ken Gross that if his property manager would send me the correct information, I would update it in our records also, which I think would help us out, because then it really shows our owner occupancy is greater than some people think.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, we want to be accurate, if nothing else. And I know we use Berkeley Management, and they stay the same, been the same for years. So
Right.
maybe the management associations could be the point for that info. Yeah.
So for a situation like me, where I have all my bills sent to my office, then y'all probably have my house listed as a rental.
No.
No.
I know where you live.
Oh, you know where.
If I know somebody lives there, I show it correctly in GIS.
Keith is so happy he does not live in Williamsburg.
But there's some addresses in some areas that I automatically know are second homes, and if they are, I show it that way.
Okay.
So I'm trying to put the best information I can, but you take neighborhoods like Skipwith, I don't have a clue. I know certain people who live in certain homes in Skipwith, but for the rental properties or the vacant properties, I wouldn't know.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going by that if it's a different address, it's a rental. If it's the same address, it's owner.
Okay. Well, that's a lot of nuances and information that you have in your head, and that's a lot of effort to put forth, and I think that's commendable.
And usually I try to note it. We have a spreadsheet, and I'll put in there second home, or I'll put in there whatever note that I know the reason that it should go one way or the other.
Okay.
So when I'm not here anymore, the next one come along can
Don't talk about that.
figure it out. So that's the table. Just to note, the apartments are highlighted in purple and the commercial quarters are in red. And I had a comment about, is a neighborhood one unit? And yes, you can't see it very well here. I'm trying to work on this map, this neighborhood map, to make it larger. And I want to do the neighborhoods alphabetized like we did in the other section. But as you can see, we put every piece of property in the city in a neighborhood. So there are a couple areas, like you saw on this list, that are just one unit right now. But I think in the future, there probably may end up being more units in those neighborhoods when those large tracts of land get developed. But that was a question I had from one member of Planning Commission, is a neighborhood one. But yes, it is one until it gets more units in there. And the reason we did that in the very beginning with the neighborhoods, we did just mainly single-family neighborhoods, and we had a smaller map. But it was really hard to keep track of all the units that way when you wanted to do a big update like the comp plan. So we went through and we actually neighborhood every city, and some of the neighborhoods are like Jamestown Road Commercial Corridor, Richmond Road Commercial Corridor. What's important in that is they actually have units in those commercial corridors, so we wanted to make sure they got counted as to the total number of units in the city. And you can see the totals down at the bottom.
It took me a second to figure out that the apartments and commercial corridors, you were referring to the color coding. Is there a way just to, I know you're really, really tight on space because there's a pile of data here. Is there a way just to say, color coding or just to tell people what that, because I thought there was maybe
Maybe
something.
put color in parentheses or something?
Yeah, just something so that stupid people like me can figure it out faster.
Well, yeah, I not stupid people like you, that was a great joke. But because I was having trouble downloading this, I eventually just sent it to the printer, and then I was working off of a black and white thing. So only later was I then able to see, oh, now that I'm in color again, apartments at the bottom is in purple, so that means those things are, so it doesn't
I
carry.
could do maybe a star for one color and 2 stars for another color, and that way if you print it.
Well, if there's just a legend on the bottom that, what it means, then people who are in different color zones or colorblind would know that there's something.
That's what I'm saying, maybe I do a star for the apartments and 2 stars
Okay.
for the commercial corridors, still keep them in color, but
Yeah.
if you happen to print it in
Okay,
black
cool.
and white, you can still see
See
that.
which ones, yeah.
Right.
Good idea.
Good.
And let me just ask another question. Queen Mary's, it's mentioned several times, approved but never built, but yet there's four. There's 4 houses that were there, and we call it Queen Mary's even though it was never,
Yes,
the subdivision was never.
that's a neighborhood,
That's
if
a
you'll
little-
see
yeah.
on the map,
Yeah, I think I know where it is, but
it's over that green one in the upper right-hand corner, the teal sort of green.
Yeah.
It's that one.
So it's
But
never.
even though,
Those are-
see, the number would go up if the development was built,
Yeah,
and
so
you'd
it's,
have 42 and probably 2, so you probably have 44 in there instead of just 4 now, because 2 were approved for demolition.
okay. So the 4 that are there were pre-existing houses before
Yes.
okay. But it doesn't say that anywhere, and that was another one. I figured it out because I know people that live over there, but it doesn't say it later on. We might just say, it was never built, although
Yeah,
there
we
are
can look at that when
pre-existing
we
houses.
get to that section,
Yeah,
maybe.
when we get there, yeah.
So the downtown planning area, this page, that's basically is coming right out of the current comp plan. And when I download it, I guess I PDF it, and it's a little wonky there, but in the PDF, but it doesn't look like that on my copy. The downtown map, I did get that one updated, so that looks pretty well. What I need to do is do the different little planning areas, the 1, 2s, 3, 4s, and 5 and 6 that we talk about in the next page, after we go and put them on the map, and then highlight them in those sections. So unless you have something on,
Carolyn, I have a
is the
quick
map
thing.
readable for you? Is it large enough?
That was the one comment. If there's any way, and this is so nitpicky, but if there's any way to just shorten the orange border space, just to enlarge the map a little bit, that would be great, because the legend is a little bit hard to read.
And then we go into the housing analysis for each of the areas. So the downtown planning area, I basically gave you the number of units, the number of single-family, the counts on that, updated all that information from the current comp plan, and I do have that dwelling unit notation there that I'll figure out another way to notify that throughout the document. For the housing chapter, I actually have a handout that I gave to the Neighborhood Balance Committee, in case you're thinking of this, because I thought about it and said, I think it belongs better in the housing chapter. I have a 5-year chart showing the increase or decrease of rentals and owners in each of the neighborhoods. So I'll provide that in the housing chapter. That's pretty interesting to look over. I think Andy saw that in the Neighborhood Balance Committee.
You planning to send this document to them as soon as it's,
To where?
to the neighborhood?
Yeah.
Balance Committee. It's really perfect.
So Peacock Hill, I just had a comment, 14 houses remain instead of stand, so unless that seemed reasonable to me to change that. The scale and character, I updated the population. Down in there, I said this facility, when we're talking about redevelopment, the Blayton Building on 613 Scotland Street, I updated that information to say this facility is located on a large lot with a potential for expansion. As noted in Chapter 3, population, there will be an increased need for additional senior housing. I pulled that from our Chapter 3 that we've looked at. In the future, the Blayton Building lot was designated mixed-use land use with the 2013 comp plan. This designation allows a base density of 14, so I updated that information to be current from our previous comp plan to the current comp plan to this comp plan chapter. On this page, I added the downtown vibrancy study, recommended a mixture of commercial and residential uses on the Blayton property, and put in that little illustrative from the study. I thought I'd put it in here, and I'd probably end up putting it in the commercial and economic section also, but I thought it was important to show that we're thinking that a mixed-use development there is appropriate. So unless the commission has a problem with that, I mean.
Good idea.
And then I updated the downtown planning area contains 104.3 acres and 255 dwelling units with a density of 2.4 units an acre.
That sentence is missing a word or some, oh, I see, you added an and since we printed it.
Yep,
Got it, okay.
I fixed that.
Yep, you're ahead of us. I printed this out this morning and you're already ahead of us. Yeah.
Then sub-area, this is the one where I talked about the sub-areas. So for each of these little sub-areas, I plan on putting a map of the downtown area and highlight the sub-area so you know what sub-area 3 relates to, and put it in here in the next draft that you see for the final draft, I hope. And also for all of those sub-areas. Then I updated that information in the sub-area 5 because the current plan says to do that, and we've already done that. So with these sub-areas, I will put a map in there. Then the Midtown planning area.
Can I back you up? I had one question about that change. You referenced the lot in the part that's struck out, but then you have this lot, and then that last sentence is in parentheses, so I just wasn't.
I'm
It's just
not
a
going to
little
put that in the plan.
Okay.
I just noted that
That's
in
why
there so
you're
you would
telling us
know
why.
that that's why I took it out.
Gotcha.
I don't think it's important enough to put it in the plan, but I figured you would say, why did you take that out?
Took it out because.
It's already been rezoned.
Got it.
So the Midtown planning area, that first page is basically right out of the current plan. I highlighted a couple edits in red in the, based on, I think, our last review were comments.
I'd like to jump in and just, I guess for the record, say I own a number of properties in Midtown and the Arts District, and pursuant to Section 2.2-3112, Paragraph A, Subparagraph 2, I'm able to vote, and I hereby certify that I'm able to participate in the conversation and transaction fairly and objectively and in the public interest. And with that, you know, we, in the Arts and Cultural District there, it talks a lot about the Arts District, and it doesn't feel right to me. We've got, by my count, 3 arts businesses in there, and we've got predominantly houses that are rental, and I know what, I believe I know what the intent was, but it just doesn't feel like we're really accurate in depicting what it is and what we're realistic in trying to get it to. There are a number of small professional offices, insurance, and such in there. So I don't have an answer. I just it doesn't
I think
feel right
that's
to me.
been the vision of council for that, and I think unless we have something that we think we want to take it to, different than what they have a grant, I believe, in economic development that you can get information if it's an arts and cultural district. I think they use that information as part of grant process for people.
Right. And I understand that, but I don't feel like it really depicts what it is, because I think to the person reading that from out of town, they think, "Oh, this is a vibrant arts and cultural district." And I know there were some stretches made. I think the Domino's was considered an arts business, and maybe Extraordinary Cupcakes because they were the culinary arts, and I just don't feel like it's an accurate depiction of really what it is to someone who doesn't know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Arts and Cultural District is aspirational for the city, and I think as long as it's part of the GIOs and the vision of what council has for the city, that we're still aspiring to make that be more vibrant and I agree it currently is not an arts and cultural district. And I mean, when we first started to see this, 10 years ago, I mean, some of the ideas was that some of those smaller places would become more like Onancock or something like that, that there'd be, more bed and breakfasts in that area and small art galleries or boutique-y kinds of places, and that has not happened. There have been some of those that have come through and have then gone away, I mean, the big white house had several sort of artsy kinds of boutique stores, but now it's a financial management business, right? But I think that there is a whole bunch of other city programming, like with EDA and city council and all that, to aspire to grow that still in that direction, that as a planning document, 5-7-year future document, until we change what our desires of the future are, that's where this fits in.
Is it the kind of thing where we could, because Greg's point's well taken, obviously.
No, it is totally well taken.
Is this the kind of thing we could put in a recommendation, if we agree that it, city should continue to encourage the development or something of an arts and cultural district, something like that, that sort of signals we're not there yet.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that the grants and the programs are in place, and that it's we aspire for it to become more of this, but at present it's still a slow transition from the traditional rental and small business area. It just seems more honest.
I think some things have got to change before it actually
Right.
takes off.
And-
Part of that's been sidewalks, which have been
Sidewalks,
put off
yeah.
before,
Yep.
and there are other things.
And that's in the,
Yeah.
we've got a grant. We've got monies,
Yeah.
it's like 5 years out, but to do the reconstruction of Lafayette Street with sidewalks on both sides,
And
and then the
removal
side
overhead
streets with new
power and all that,
sidewalks.
probably.
So that's in the works. It's like 5 or 6 years out, if I remember correctly.
I think a lot of it, this is my personal opinion, I think a lot of it will correct itself with the additional student housing options. I think the supply and the demand is just going to control it at this point. And so with the new housing that'll be built, it'll take the pressure off of some of those, and an art gallery might be something that can afford to go in there. because they're just, none of them are at market rate at this point.
I think Midtown Road will help,
Yeah,
putting 640 possible new individuals in those apartment units will
Virtually across the street.
may help to bring the type of uses we think,
yeah.
hope this area to achieve.
Yep. So I think language about aspires to and is poised to do this, I think that's great language to have in there. And it would be nice if we could maybe not drive off the small insurance agencies that are there now. I know there was a tone, an unintentional tone, but there were businesses that were like, I'm an insurance agent. They don't want me here anymore. I'm leaving. I'm a lawyer. They just want arts businesses. So,
Maybe I'll add a sentence or two to that section for our next. I'll think of some type of wording to say that it's currently not this, but we're going to aspire to, at the redevelopment of Midtown Row and blah, blah, blah. I can come up with some type of wording in there and add that to.
And maybe it's that with the redevelopment of Midtown
Right.
Row, while we have had this aspiration for this area for the past 10 years, we have a new point of reference to think about new programming or new grant work or something like that to think about the next 5 to 7 years.
And then it gets special treatment with ARB as well.
Right.
yep.
So the Midtown planning area, I updated the dwelling units. We have 659% owner occupied and 648 renter occupied, so we're at 98 and 2%. And that's not surprising because of the apartment complexes that are basically Mount Vernon, the City Green, let's get that development name wrong, is rental, the 24 condo units. We also now have the Richmond Hall, which are rental units. So, and a lot of the units along Lafayette Street are rented. They're not owner occupied anymore. So updated the shopping center area. I called it Midtown Row, updated that. Midtown Row, I gave the date it was approved, mixed use with 220 residential units containing 640 bedrooms with a mixture of retail and restaurant and office space. I also moved the 53-bed nursing facility is located in this area from the college area that it was previously in, because that is actually where it is located, in the red Mount Vernon Avenue and not the college. So here's the breakdown of the rental units in the Midtown. Basically, is giving you separate for each of those separate areas. That's another example of, I'm not going to put it in the final draft, but under Arts and Cultural District, those 4 lots, we did rezone those. And that was just a note to you all, so you would know why I crossed that out.
This isn't a comment, but a question. Has there been any discussion with Broad Street Realty if they're on track for their development right now?
Yes,
They are.
We got all 4 buildings finished plan review
Okay.
and the parking garage. They are working with the contractor. Within the next week, I think they'll be getting all of their building permits. So they are on schedule for opening 2021.
Okay, great. 'Cause I've seen a lot of
That's
good
what they're telling me.
businesses, Marshalls and Earth Fair come in, but I haven't seen it grow vertically yet. So
Right.
just curious. Good.
Yeah, but they still say they're on schedule for 2021.
Summer of 2021, right? Yeah.
And we are starting the road construction. You probably saw the signs go up. So pretty soon we'll be starting the Monticello Avenue reconstruction for the project, and of course the multi-use trail that comes along the front of Richmond Road is part of that. So I think the two are still on track to have everything that will be done, I think, with the road construction probably next year. It's not follow behind with the,
Do you think
Okay, good.
the road work will be done in 2020 and that the housing will be 2021?
once that gets started, I don't think they're looking at a year to construct that, 9 months to a year, depending on the weather.
Right,
So we think those road improvements will be done next year. And then follow up with the residential units coming on board. You'll probably get one building earlier than the other.
Of course, of course.
But all of them will
But
be
the road
finished.
work seems to me, I'm heartened to hear about that because at least the current student body group that we have, I mean, this fall, it's been very noticeable to me at least, how many people are walking up and down Monticello and biking in the wrong direction on Monticello where it's 45 miles an hour and all that kind of stuff. It's like, we need to get this.
Yep,
Yeah.
a lot more activity, I think, on Monticello and Richmond Road. From Richmond Hall
Yeah.
all the
Oh,
way,
that's right.
like you say, both directions. But yeah, it's not going to take us to summer of 2021 to finish the street construction. And we're moving ahead with that, so that's rolling.
Good.
That's why you're seeing those signs
Cool.
started. What'll be nice with that, also the multi-use trail that goes to Newtown will be done about the same time, so we'll have a nice path all the way from Newtown, all the way up to Richmond Road, and with the multi-use across the front of the shopping center, it'll be a nice connection for students to go two ways to campus, really. You got campus Compton Drive, and you can come up Richmond Road and go in through Brook Street. All the little areas in between that you can go back and forth in campus. College also got approval for Compton Drive to do
Sidewalk there, that piece that
path
doesn't
along
have it.
Compton Drive from Monticello into campus too, so it's all seeming to come together
together,
pretty
yeah.
good at one time, so. So the Midtown planning area contains 106.8 acres, 659 units with a density of 6.2 acres per net acre. Northeast Triangle. Basically, I call it the Forest Hill neighborhood, neighborhood. Put that in there because I did take that out we did split that area up from Capitol Landing Commercial and the Forest Hill neighborhood. We split those out and became them two neighborhoods because the Forest Hill neighborhood is more residential and we kept the commercial, so that's the reason I put that in there. And I mentioned that Queen Mary's Port subdivision.
Yeah, it just threw up a red flag, has not been constructed, but there's 4 residents there. It just maybe just a note that clarifies that.
Currently contains 4 residences, 4 dwelling units.
Yeah, that were there before the subdivision was approved or something like that.
Merrimack Trail, basically when I updated I put the units in parentheses there. And the reason I did that is a lot of times people think about apartment complexes, and they always want to know the number of units in the complex. But then you would have to go way back into the first chapter with the big chart to find
yeah.
it. And I just thought it would be nice to have it next to the apartment complex. And I changed, of course, the name of the village of Woodshire to Merrimack Crossing.
And is this, looking at this, does this include the Econo Lodge that's now going to be,
No,
Keanu,
it's current.
okay,
do you have any plans to put a picture next to those bullet points?
Yes.
Okay.
I should have mentioned that the person I hired to do the aerials, with the drone, I should be getting those the first of next month.
Okay.
So a lot of those nice pictures I
Okay.
hope to incorporate into all the text. All of these, I think it would be nice to have a nice picture of what the neighborhood looks like. And if I
Yes.
don't have a photo, I probably will try to take a picture of the GIS map for that neighborhood and show and outline the neighborhood in that for each of them. I think that would be nice to be able to put in there, and sort of gives you an idea of where Pinecrest is.
Right, no, absolutely.
The different neighborhoods are. We know it, but if someone was looking at the document, they're not as familiar with the city as we are. So I thought that would be nice, and that's why I've left all these blank
Sure.
over there, to be able to put maps over on the right-hand side. I didn't put insert map because I would do the same thing on this one, is the map here. I'm going to try to enlarge that a little bit and make that updated the housing analysis for that section, breakdown for the single-family neighborhoods. And then for the townhomes and condos, I broke those down also, and the apartment complexes. Note, I took in the breakdown for the capital land and commercial is 18 dwelling units, 17 occupied, 83 rental, so I did add those areas that we didn't previously have in the previous plan, red, and I did the same thing for a Second Street commercial area. We got a 2674 rental occupancy in the northeast triangle with 1,304 dwelling units, up being 4.2 dwelling units. And I think I would probably put the map back here again. See at the end. I get through the text and then I can pretty it up. Then I don't have to worry about the pictures hiding behind the text.
Right, right. Now, adding all this data must have been a Herculean task, so thank you for all the inclusions there.
Yeah, I was here last Thursday night to 10
gosh.
o'clock.
Yeah.
Finishing up the data for this. This is, for data, this is the hardest chapter, one of the hardest. This and housing will be the two hardest as far as crunching the numbers. Quarter path at Williamsburg, I plan on, again, to do maps for each of those little areas, areas 1, 2, and 3, and 4. I updated the hospital section there, just basically updating it's been completed and contains under construction. Not much change in this. High Street. Update that the 96 apartment units. If you get a chance, ride by. I think it turned out beautiful. Nice development. Amenities, which really nice. I met with the developer. He's doing the 223 units. They're under construction. They're doing the groundwork for that right now. And the idea is that they're not two separate units. They're one complex. They're going to be under one name. So the amenities on both sides of the street will be used by the users, the renters who rent there. So the one that's under construction now, of course, has the underground parking garage. But on top of the parking garage, they've got the pool. He showed me a rendering of what the pool looks like. That area, I think, will become a really nice rental apartment area. High-end units. I think that area is turning out really nice with developers. But if you get a chance, ride by there. Instead of going Richmond Road, cut through Trayvon and go over, ride by it, and it turned out really nice. The units, what was nice is he did the units in such a way that they complement the townhouse units that were all brick. Even though these aren't all brick, the units are stacked to look like townhouses when in fact they have apartments. So I think we all did a good job in getting that to fit in with the surrounding existing.
Oh, yeah. No, I've already seen Downton Abbey, so there. So, so I saw them. But while they were under construction, it was like, how is this gonna work out? You know, I felt like I was looking at a Lego project or something like that, that they were looking this, like they were gonna be townhouses, but I knew they were gonna be apartments, but now that they're done, they do really look nice, yeah.
Really nice job. So once we build those out, that'll be all the apartment units in High Street, and then we're left with just the three areas in the commercial section, which will show up in your economic, commercial section of the comp plan. We have 3 lots, one up front on Richmond Road, the lot where the hotel was supposed to be, and then the lot where the grocery store is supposed to be commercial on High Street. And they get developed, that whole development will be finished. And I think what will help that is these residential units that are under construction right now at the back. So then I went through other residential areas and just updated some of that information. I will also go in and do maps or pictures of where these neighborhoods are. They're all pretty self-explanatory. I just updated some of the data in them. B&Bs along Jamestown Road have gone from 8 to 5. Changed some of the wording, impact on the neighborhood instead of nothing. Change the college to the university. It's the hardest thing for me to remember. All these chapters to remember to change college.
It's very controversial, yeah.
So it's consistent.
If you forget, some of us won't complain.
But I also, if you didn't notice it, between your draft and the one you see on the screen, some of them had single-family dwelling district RS2 with the RS2 at the back, and some of them had RS2 single-family dwelling district with the RS2 up front. I went through and made them all the same.
Oh, cool.
I put the
Nice.
RS2 at the back, so all of those numbers I switched to make sure they were all consistent, and they're both ways in the current plan, but I figured I'd try to get consistency in it, and I went through and changed all of those.
I had a question here, personal interest. So I'm in West Williamsburg Heights. The recommendation section to the right of that says the vacant Casey Field. Where is Casey Field? I looked it up online and couldn't find it.
You know where 711 Richmond Road is at Nelson?
Okay,
Brick house?
yeah,
When you go past the White House with the gold shutters,
okay,
then you've got Casey's house. Mr. Casey lived there, and he's now moved to Walnut Hills.
Okay.
That big field that runs between Richmond Road and Lafayette Street.
Lafayette, it's that one?
That's what we call Casey
okay,
Field.
okay. It's the one behind his house then, all right. I've
So
always
that-
wondered, I didn't know that had a
That
name,
brings up a
but
good point to put a picture there,
sure.
Yeah, I mean,
to show where that is.
yeah.
Mark that on there so I don't forget. South Henry Street. Added the Mimosa neighborhood. Added the section in there because South Henry Street did not have the Mimosa. It's probably not on yours. Andy mentioned it, so I added it in my draft that you see on the screen. The Mimosa neighborhood is comprised of single-family dwellings in Mimosa Woods, which contains 14 rental units owned by the Williamsburg Redevelopment and Housing Authority. So I added that because that was actually missing from the current chapter. We had 4 neighborhoods, and it's really 5 neighborhoods when you look at it. It sort of mentioned Mimosa Drive, but I think it's enough going on Mimosa Drive that we ought to say what's down that. So that was my recommendation on updating that.
It's grown a lot in the last few years. It's grown a lot in the last few years.
Yes.
Houses down there.
Yeah, we've had, what, 5 or 6 new houses built
Yeah,
on
and
the
building
left-hand
one now.
side. So I added that to the end of the recommendation to make sure we said the Housing Authority. So that's all I have. I think I've covered that chapter. Comments or questions or recommendations?
Awesome. Really.
I will add.
What a
I
job.
will add maps, I will add pictures. I'm waiting on the neighborhood pictures that I've hired the consultant to do. Supposed to be flown, I think, last week, so I'll probably be getting draft pictures in the first couple of weeks of October, so that'll help us out with a lot of neat new pictures to put in the comp plan. And unless you have any.
So any further comments or questions generically for Carolyn? Okay, well then, the agenda says that we now have an open forum, so I will announce that we have an open forum. And I will then close the open forum, and we are adjourned. Yeah, great, thank you.